Hey guys, Youngblood with you for the 39th episode of the Unbox, and this time we're going to start off with a question from Maxwell R. saying, I'm looking into the Carrack as a part-time exploration vessel with a full-time command of fleet. Is this logical? I feel like that because the Carrack has that massive plotting table, it could double as a command base. Yes, I think while the Carrack is absolutely a dedicated explorer, it does have capabilities in other aspects of the game. You know, you look down at those modular pods at the bottom of the ship, and it can obviously do a lot of cargo hauling as well. And when I talked about command and control ships, the Carrack was absolutely one of the ones that I put in the running, just because it does have the, the nice visibility out of the front of the ship. It's got the plotting table that you could use. It's got the upgraded scanners and all those things that really help you out in regards to commanding a fleet. Now, the question's going to probably then end up being, is the equipment that's installed on that table sufficient for commanding a fleet, or do you have to upgrade those components to an actual command and control table? We don't know that yet, especially since the Carrack's not in the game yet, and we don't have any real command and control and sharing of target information amongst other players. So I think it will absolutely serve that role well. It's an anvil ship, so I think it also is probably going to have some of that durability. So if you are getting pestered, you've got a little extra survivability. But for what you want the ship to be, I think it's an excellent option for you. Dragon Templar 4 says, do you think the Polaris will be a better option over the Idris? That's kind of like asking, do I like apples or oranges better? Because the ships are going to be really different. The Polaris was created because the Idris outgrew its role and its intended role to start with. The Idris became a frigate. It was supposed to be a corvette initially, so they had to develop a corvette to fill that role. So you're not really comparing two ships of the same. Now, when you want to compare those two, you can say, all right, well, do you need a hangar bay? Do you want the ability to rearm and refuel your ships? Do you want the big rail gun? Then those are going to probably point you towards the Idris. If you want something that's faster, something that handles a little bit more like a normal ship, something that's more about area denial and kind of pestering as opposed to brute force, then the Polaris is probably going to be a better option. But there is so much more that goes into it. The Polaris is going to be a lot cheaper than the Idris. The Idris is going to have a much larger crew capacity, so you can bring a lot more of your friends along, but it's also going to be a lot more expensive if you have to hire NPCs. The Polaris should probably be cheaper to operate as far as ammo costs and repairs and refuels. There's a lot of factors that go into it, and the ships are just so different. It's hard to say that one's a better option over the other. It's which one's the better option for what you want it to do. James Good says, ground combat you touched on here is something I've been trying to get answers for. I mean, a task force with a Bengal and a couple of javelins and some Idrises can control space, but to take the planet and the Marines and Army are going to have to land and force to occupy the planet. That also means armor and other support vehicles as well. It seems that they're being very quiet about that. What is your opinion on it? I think the reason they're being quiet on it is because they haven't really figured it out yet, or they haven't necessarily developed the assets that are needed. I think we're going to see more ground vehicles, and in the 3.0 Gamescom presentation, we did see dragonflies and Ursa rovers conducting ground combat. And so it's going to be a part of the game. I think the question is, when is it going to come, and what does the end of that look like? Because you can still use a spaceship to fight on the planet. We saw the Freelancer actually attacking players on the ground. So, are you really better off bringing a land tank, another armor like that on the ground when you could just bring in a Super Hornet that's still capable of performing in atmosphere, or a ship that's a little bit more plane-like, like a Gladius, for example. I have to think that these highly specialized or these really effective aircraft are going to be the ones that are probably going to be more proficient. So I don't think you're ever going to see a situation where there's a ton of armored vehicles, like land vehicles, but I think you are going to see several situations where you have, Marines and Army working in conjunction with some ground vehicles and aircraft to really kind of create that combined arms type of attack. There may be other things that end up being factored in as well. Can an Idris or a Javelin or a Bengal, are there some form of orbital strike that they can do as well? We don't know everything that's going into it, and, I think we'll probably get our first taste of it in Squadron 42, but I don't think we're going to get all of the answers for probably a while, because flying your spaceship is what the game is really about, and then they're adding in all the other aspects to really make it a more immersive experience, kind of that entire space simulator, not just a space flight simulator. So I think those types of things are coming, but I think it's pretty low priority right now, and it's probably a long ways out. Robot Mechanic says, this may have already been answered, but how do you think owning a space station will play out? Could you take down a station, or will you just be able to buy one? I don't think you're going to be able to buy one in the short term. And the reason I say that is because I think it's going to be incredibly expensive. As far as capturing the space station or holding a space station or owning one, I think owning is going to kind of be in like quotations. My force is the one that occupies this station. So we're the ones that set the rules. We kind of set the pace, and large organizations may be able to do that. Now, if you want to actually take one down, or at least kind of take over control of it, I think you're going to have to, have a significant boarding party. It's going to be kind of like we talked about with the planets just a minute ago. You're going to need a combined arms type of operation, because there's going to be ships that are defending it. Some space stations are going to have weapons probably that'll also help defend it. So you need ships that are capable of disarming the station, taking out the enemy aircraft, and then you need to be able to get a significant marine force inside that's actually capable of disarming and pacifying the population inside of that station. So it's going to be really complicated to do. And if we take a look at what we've seen from other ships, or what they've talked about with other ships, there's going to be defenses inside of the ships too. So, you may be able to walk in, kill all the Marines, but there may be auto turrets all over the place that are trying to keep you at bay. So it's going to be really complicated. It's going to be really hard. But I think that comes with kind of a give and a take. It's really hard to get, but it's probably a lot easier to hold it once you actually get it, assuming you have the players online. And that's going to be another problem. A space station is going to be persistent. It's going to be more along the lines of like a Bengal carrier. So, when your players log out, there's going to be nobody there to actually protect the station. And that's why I say large organizations are going to have the advantage there, because if they've got people that can play around the clock because they're, international, then all of a sudden they're going to have a better shot of actually holding that station. There's other things that'll be factored in, like it's probably going to be kind of boring just to try and hold a space station if it's not one that's being attacked a lot. So you may lose player interest, but it also depends on what else you can do with that station. If you can run shops out of it, or you can kind of store your goods there and those types of things and kind of make it your like hub of operations, then that's kind of a different situation too. But that's a lot of speculation, considering we don't have any of those mechanics in place today, but that's kind of my vision on how that would probably work out. Jeff Hardy says, do you have any idea on what ship we may see a particle beam weapon for first? I know on one of the 10 for the Chairman's, Chris said Star Citizen would have such weapons. I have no idea. If it's a brand new weapon and it's something that they're developing, it could be something on a very massive scale, like the Super Dreadnought, the Retribution class that's coming out. That may end up being a ship that has a massive particle beam weapon. The entire ship looks like a ship constructed around a weapon. It's got that giant channel running down the middle of it. Now, that looks to me more like a railgun, but we don't know what the design of these types of weapons are going to look like. So it could very easily be some sort of like next level new technology of particle beam weapon that ends up being on a massive scale. And then technically we check the box and say, yep, Star Citizen has that type of weapon in it. It could also be new weapons for your ships. And I think with what they're trying to do, they're trying to develop different types of weapons and ships and gameplay. And they're going to continue to put in new content. So even if at release we don't actually get one of those, it's maybe something that they decide to put in, that's capable. And as far as just really specifically what ship we may see that on, most of the weapons in this game are customizable. On a Gladius, you could put on, ballistics. You could put on energy weapons. There's some ships like the Delta you can put on rocket pods or like laser repeaters. Because of that, I don't think there's necessarily going to be one ship that's going to have a beam particle weapon. It would be more they develop the weapon and you can put it on anything that's a capable hard point. The only situation where I would say it's just one ship would be if it is on like that Super Dreadnought. Rogue says, hi STL, I was wondering whether the Cutlass would be able to hold a dragonfly, and how many do you think it can hold? And then along those same lines, also asking about how many ore crates from the Prospector the Cutlass is going to be able to hold. This is a complicated question because the Cutlass is going through a rework. That's going to be a gameplay design rework. That's going to be an art design rework. It's probably going to involve a size design rework. There's a ton of things that are going to be happening to the Cutlass. So the short answer here is we don't know. Theoretically, the interior of a Cutlass is big enough to hold a dragonfly, but the problem is the ramp to get in there is very small. My gut says that when they're redoing this, they're going to make that ramp bigger, or potentially make it so the bottom of the Cutlass drops down, almost like you see on the Constellation series. The problem there is there's not as much ground clearance between the bottom of the ship, so it involves a significant rework by increasing the height of the legs, and I know some people were criticizing how that would end up looking. So I don't really know. I mean, it makes sense to be able to put one in there, especially if you can put it in a Freelancer. Then you get a little bit of synergy between the two Drake ships, but where it stands today, I don't think it'll fit through the door, but I think based on changes they're probably going to be making to the ship, I would probably expect it to fit at the end of the day. As far as the Mist Prospector ore crates, the crates kind of suffer from the same fate as the Dragonfly. It just depends on what the size of the ship ends up being, and mostly with the door. Those crates on the Prospector are much bigger than they look. They're taller than a person. They're wider than a person. So with that in mind, I don't think the door that's in place today is going to really be supporting you taking those onto the ship. But once the rework gets done, we'll have a better idea. And now on to our two patron questions for the day, starting off with one from Garian. Space debris, solar flares, wear and tear. Have we any indication from CIG about passive threats to our spaceships beyond the fact that they have stated that ships are going to be aging visibly? I think about solar flares affecting instrumentation, micrometeorites or space debris coming out of nowhere, natural phenomena. Example, will our ships deal with increased radiation from heat from flying closer to the stars? Will certain ships be better suited to tasks like this other than level of detail, or is that too much to expect at this point? I think it's too much to expect at this point, just because I don't think those environmental effects are in-game. Now, what we can do is we can kind of extrapolate from the lore, like in videos that I've done for the star map, and there's a lot of planets where they say things like the atmosphere is so corrosive it'll eat away at your ship, or there's different nebula where pirates will actually hide out because it does impact avionics and instrumentation. So there's going to be environmental things that are going to wreak havoc on your ship. I think there was also another system that had some electromagnetic effect that kind of caused a lot of pilots to disappear. So those types of things are going to be present in the game. Now, how does that actually represent itself on our ships? We don't really know. I would say that corrosive atmospheres are going to be probably just wearing down your overall hull quality. It's probably going to deal damage to your components. So like capacitors on your engines may start to go, or like in that situation, for example, it may be like your shields. Your shields may start to break down faster because they're having to work so much harder, and then components then overheat. And then once your shields go, then maybe you start to see your hull start to degrade. And since you're on a planet, you're going to be at the kind of the mercy of atmospheric flight models. And if you're starting to lose chunks of your wings, then all of a sudden you're not going to be flying better and you may end up crashing and dying. So I think those are the types of things you're going to see. We haven't really had confirmation on all the different types of impacts, but I think just looking at what we can read from the lore and knowing the level of detail they want to put into this game, I think we can kind of make some assumptions there. And the last question is from Elfwin. Currently in the Alpha PU, how many ships can a single player spawn on the server without them disappearing? What are the other limitations in that regard? So it's kind of glitchy right now. I think what it's really supposed to be is if you spawn a ship and then you spawn another one, your original ship disappears. Just last night I was actually playing and I had a Starfarer that I spawned. I realized that none of the weapons were actually on the ship, so I went to go spawn another one. It did not despawn my current Starfarer. There's also going to be ones where I've seen constellations just floating around above Port Alizar that I know people have spawned other ships and they didn't disappear. I think that's the intention, at least in the short term, just to keep the server a little bit cleaner. But once the server gets, the 64-bit system, and once the server is actually capable of keeping track of more and better objects, I think you're going to start seeing more ships being there. One of the problems right now is, one aspect of piracy is the ability to steal a ship. But there's not enough persistence in that regard. So when somebody steals a ship and you go spawn another one, it despawns, or it's supposed to despawn that ship from that player that stole your ship, and they're just left floating there. So I think we're going to see a lot of that stuff being implemented pretty soon. I would say definitely by 3.0, I would assume. But today, right now, there's kind of varying results in how that actually works. The question is, what's the real intention behind it? But honestly, I've seen situations where the ships just disappear, and I've seen situations where the ships actually persist. So not a real clear answer because the game doesn't really handle itself in a consistent manner either. So that's it for this episode. I appreciate you guys watching. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, stay tuned for more. Have a wonderful day. Take care.